Welcome everyone for tuning in. We are a few minutes behind, but was just getting some things set up. Was making a call with one of our community members as they were calling just to check if we're still doing food this week and to let you know that we are still serving food from 12 to 1:30. We have lunches available and supper will be available from 3:30 to 5:30. Yet again, many thanks to all of our community partners and members that have been joining with us and partnering with us to make sure that our kids during this time have everything that they need. So, got all that taken care of. We're ready. Hatchet, chapter 11. But again, if you're tuning in, please hit that share button. Please get this message and these awesome learnings that we've been doing, these e-learnings that we've been doing, get these out to friends and family. You may have family that are elsewhere that are underneath some stay-at-home acts and self-quarantining. Please send these to them. Send these resources. Share them with them. Let's continue to build this community as we're going and growing. Yes, so lunch, share. I'm just excited, ready to get back into chapter 11. If you remember where we left off, for those that are just tuning in, we're doing the book Hatchet by Gary Paulsen. It started off a young man by the name of Brian Roberson. Parents had a divorce. He's going to spend the summer with his father in Canada. While he's on the plane, pilot passes away, unfortunately. So now this young man is faced with choices. How does he survive? He figures out a way to crash land the plane. And from there, now has to survive in the wilderness. He has bruises. He's hurt. He needs to find food. He finds some berries, but these berries, as he affectionately calls gut berries, doesn't well with them. He ends up finding raspberries. He learns how to make fire. He gets attacked by a porcupine. He sees a bear. So much has been going on. And if you want to tune in, please go to our YouTube or check our Facebook out. We have all these of us going through the chapters. But today, we are going to start with chapter 11. And if we remember at the end of chapter 10, himself some turtle eggs. Can you imagine not having nothing to eat, that you have to eat raw turtle eggs? I mean, I've seen people do it in movies and heard some bodybuilders do it, but for me, it wouldn't be something I have to do. But yet again, our word for this book is resilient and resiliency. Brian has been showing a lot of resiliency, and he's doing what he has to do, but he's making a plan, and he's staying positive. So let's begin with chapter 11. There were these things to do. He transferred all the eggs from the small beach into the shelter, reburying them near his sleeping area. It took all his will to keep from eating another one as he moved them, but he got it done, and they were out of the sight again, and it was easier. He added wood to the fire and cleaned up the camp area. A good laugh. That, cleaning the camp? All he did was shake out his windbreaker and hang it in the sun to dry the berry juice that had soaked in it, and he smoothed the sand where he slept. But it was a mental thing. He had gotten depressed thinking about how they hadn't found him yet. And when he was busy, he had to have something to do, and the depression then seemed to leave. So there were these things to do. With the camp squared away, he brought in more wood. He decided to always have enough on hand for 3 days. And after spending one night with the fire for a friend he knew, with the camp squared away, he brought in more wood. He decided to always have enough on hand for 3 days, and after spending one night with the fire for a friend, he knew what a staggering amount of wood it would take. He worked all through the morning at the wood, breaking down dead limbs, breaking or chopping them into smaller pieces, storing them neatly beneath the overhang. He stopped once to take a drink at the lake, and in his reflection, he saw that the swelling on his head was nearly gone. There was no pain there, so he assumed that it had taken care of itself. His leg was also back to normal, although he had a small pattern of holes, roughly star-shaped, where the quills had nailed him. And while he was standing at the lake shore, taking stock, he noticed that his body was changing. He had never been fat, but he had been slightly heavy with a little extra weight just above the belt at the sides. This was completely gone, and his stomach had caved into the hunger, and the sun had cooked him past burning, so he was tanning. And with the smoke from the fire, his face was starting to look like leather. But perhaps more than his body was the change in his mind, or in the way he was becoming. I am not the same, he thought. I see, I hear differently. He did not know when the change started, but it was there. When a sound came to him now, he didn't just hear it, but would know the sound. He would swing and look at it, a breaking twig, a movement of air, and know the sound as if he was somehow could move his mind back down the wave of sound to the source. He could know what the sound was he could know what the sound was quite before he realized he heard it. And when he saw something, a bird moving a wing inside a bush or a ripple on the water, he would truly see the thing, not just noticed it as he used to notice the things in the city. He would see all parts of it, see the whole wing, the feathers, see the color of the feathers, see the bush and the size and the shape and color of its leaves. He would see the way the light moved with the ripples of the water and see that the wind made the ripples and which way the wind had to blow to make the ripples move in a certain way. None of that used to be in Brian, and now it was a part of him, a changed part of him, a grown part of him. And the two things, his mind and his body, had come together as well, had made a connection with each other that he didn't quite understand. When his ears heard a sound or his eyes saw a sight, his mind took control of his body. Without his thinking, he moved to face the sound or sight, moved to make ready for it, to deal with it. These were things he had to do. When the wood was done, he decided to get a signal fire ready. He moved to the top of the rock ridge that comprised the bluff over his shelter and was pleased to find a large flat stone area. More wood, he thought, moaning inwardly. He went back to the fallen trees and found more dead limbs, carrying them up on the rock until he had enough for a bonfire. Initially, he thought about making a signal fire every day, but he couldn't. He would never be able to keep the wood supply going. So, while he was working, he decided to have the fire ready. And if he heard an engine or even thought that he heard a plane engine, he would run up with a burning limb and set off the signal fire. Things to do. At the last trip to the top of the stone bluff with wood, he stopped, sat on the point overlooking the lake, and rested. The lake lay before him, 20 or so feet below, and he had not seen it in this way since he had come in with the plane. Remembering the crash, he had a moment of fear, a breath-tightening little rip of terror, but it passed as he was quickly caught up in the beauty of the scenery. It was so incredibly beautiful that it was almost unreal. From his height, he could see not just the lake, but across part of the forest, a green carpet, and it was full of life. Birds, insects, there was a constant hum and song. And at the end of the bottom of the L, there was another large rock sticking out over the water. And on top of the rock, a snaggly pine had somehow found food and grown. Bent and gnarled, sitting on one limb was a bluebird with a crest and a sharp beak, a kingfisher. He thought of a picture he had seen once, which left the branch while he watched and dove into the water and emerged a split second later, in its mouth a small fish, wiggling silver in the sun. It took the fish to a limb, juggled it twice, and swallowed it whole. Fish. Of course, he thought. There were fish in the lake, and there were food. And if a bird could do it, he scrambled down the side of the bluff and trotted to the edge of the lake. Looking down into the water somehow, it never occurred to him to look inside the water, only at the surface. The sun was flashing back up into his eyes, and he moved off to the side and took off his shoes and waded out 15 feet. Then he turned and stood still, and with the sun at his back, he studied the water again. It was, he saw after a moment, literally packed with life. Small fish swam everywhere, some narrow, some long, some round, most of them 3 or 4 inches long, some a bit bigger, and many smaller. There was a patch of mud off to the side, leading into deeper water, and he could see old clam shells there. So there must be clams. And he watched a crayfish, looking like a tiny lobster, left one of the empty clam shells and went to another, looking for something to eat, digging with his claws. While he stood, some of the small round fish came quite close to his legs, and he tensed. He got ready and made a wild stab at grabbing one of them. They exploded away in 100 flicks of quick light, so fast that he had no hope of catching them in that way. But they soon came back, seemed to be curious about him. And as he walked from the water, he tried to think of a way to use that curiosity to catch them. He had no hooks or string, but if he could somehow lure them into the shadows and make a spear, a small fish spear, he might be able to strike fast enough to get one. He would have to find the right kind of wood, slim and straight. He had seen some willows up the lake that might work, and he could use the hatchet to sharpen it and shape it while he was sitting by the fire tonight. And that brought up the fire, which he had to feed again. He looked at the sun and saw how it was getting late in the afternoon. And when he thought of how late it was, he thought that he ought to reward all his hard work with another egg. And that made him think some kind of dessert would be nice. He smiled when he thought of dessert. So fancy. He wondered if he should move up the lake to see if he could find some raspberries after he banked the fire. And while he was looking for the right wood for a spear, spearwood, he thought, and it all rolled together, just rolled together and rolled over him. These were the things to do. So I hope that as you're reading this chapter, you're seeing how Brian is even explaining it. His mentality is changing. I think that like that word resiliency, being able to stand up and bear under any type of stress or pain or stressor or any type of negativity or oppression or anything like that, to be resilient is a strong characteristic that we all need during this time. Because these are trying times. These are testing times. But I think that if we could come through these times and grow through these times, just like Brian is going through this experience, he's starting to understand that he's changing. And these changes are, in a sense, helping make him a better person. He's becoming more aware. He's becoming more mature. He's becoming more understanding, more conscious. He's connecting his mind and body, as he said. And I love that aspect of the story, of how this young man is able to take an adverse situation, to not give up, to remain positive, and to make sure that his mind is as strong as his body. He understood that if he sat there and thought of all the negativity that's going on around him, he'll fall into depression. He'll become depressed, and then he won't be able to get things accomplished. Now, of course, just being resilient isn't the only answer for mental health issues like that, but it's still a good aid and a good resource to have that mental strength, to be able to connect those to your body, to your mind, to the things going around you. So I hope, like me, that you are getting a lot from this story, not just at the surface level, but just always maybe seeing some things about yourself and how you could become resilient and stronger in the things that you go through in life. Well, I'm excited to see what happens in chapter 12. His mind is clicking. He's starting to think of more ways he could incorporate and get more food. So let's see now if he's going to be able to be successful in his next endeavor in chapter 12 of trying to find a way how to catch this fish. Question: what would you do? Do you have any tips and tricks of how you would be able to catch some fish or some food in these scenarios? Well, if you do, please go ahead and share them in the chat. We'd love to see them. We'd love to talk about them, and we'd love to connect with you. Just a reminder, we're serving food now. Our supper time from 12 to 1:30. I believe we have chips, apples, milks, some sandwiches, and also some PB&J sandwiches. This afternoon, we'll be serving fazoli's, I believe, penne Alfredo with meat sauce. And so, please join us. We'd love to see you and connect with you. And I think that's it. I'll see you at 3 o'clock for chapter 12. Peace.